I didn't finish a game I was streaming, and I'm still gonna review it. It's so new, in fact, that I had to come up with a new type of review for the channel just to talk about it. Continuing with the Chicago public transit system theme of the loop reviews, Derailed feels like it fits best for my experience in Nightingale. Let's start here. I've said it a million times, I play a lot of survival crafters. I play a lot of survival crafters that are in early access too. I have yet to experience an early access game that fights against fun and playing the game like Nightingale does. The game is honestly the most poor showing I've seen from a studio in this space in a long time, and I do not plan on cutting any slack for early access with this one. When every other game in this space that launches early access is at least playable and mostly cohesive, it feels like a slap in the face to what these other studios and developers have done to put this game out like it is. Many of the decisions made here feel like a grab bag of industry buzzwords and not like a cohesive experience. When the competition is as stiff as Icarus, The Forest, Valheim, V-Rising, Enshrouded and Palworld, you have to be on point when bringing something to the table. And this is by far the one that let me down the hardest. Am I completely blowing this out of proportion, or is Nightingale destined to be a letdown for good? Play your realm cards and pray to the Fae for guidance in Nightingale's Derailed review. The concepts and gameplay that Nightingale attempts to introduce are completely different than anything else in this genre. Realms to explore, changes to the adventure at player discretion, procedurally generated maps, dungeons and survival all wrapped into one title. On paper, that would be the most diverse game in the genre, hands down. And in preferential camera positions in first or third person, a promised party content system, and a story and world riddled with references to fictional characters of history and Victorian era setting that could lead to really interesting design and gameplay choices. We should be on cloud 9 here. Gearing that actually matters, enemies that scale in difficulty, random loot and enchantments. It sounds like a marriage of the best parts of games. Starting off like many other games in the genre, you have an intro sequence to work through, but unlike many others, before you can even talk to your friends, you have to work your way through that intro that can take anywhere from 30 minutes to much longer. It all depends how many portals you can actually make it through. Once done though, the game opens up a bit and shows off many of the things that you can do with a quest line that makes enough sense and guides the player to new gear, combat, your first base of operations, and that's about it. They explain the portal card system, but not how the portals actually interact. What happens if a portal closes? Is there only combat for new portals or every portal? Why does it take so long on a reopening of a portal? These questions and many more are left to the player to figure out for themselves. But the game still stops you to explain topics and concepts that seem to not really work overall anyway. The world of the game focuses a lot on the realm system. Lost amongst the realms, you must find your way to Nightingale, the last bastion of humanity in the realms, and with the help of your Fae guide Puck, you're set on a path to get there and try to get your way home. To traverse these portals, humans need to use realm cards, a system that tells the portals where you're trying to go and how wacky it should be when you get there. The realms and the cards themselves have a lot of interesting options wrapped up with them, but it takes a while before any of those cards become available in any meaningful way. The cards can specifically affect the things that you can find in the realms that you travel to, be it new mats, traders, characters, and upgrades, special dungeons, and more. There are many options for the realms and many more options promised in the future development. The combat of the game, the puzzles that litter the land, the collections of materials is what takes center stage for the game though, and it's a mixed bag. The combat itself is pretty basic, but doesn't feel great in third or first person. The accuracy is greatly changed between the two, and it feels almost like third person was hobbled together last second for the fun of it and the extra player engagement. The enemies you encounter can scale based on gear and realm, which is a nice touch and adds a reason to continue your progression with gear. But the game also forces you to gear up before trying anything new, which feels like the game grinds you to a halt and puts you on rails when the whole point of the game is how open and free the player-driven world can be. The bound enemies are a bit samey in my opinion, though the different versions do have different capabilities. The animals all just sort of run at you and attack with little to no diversity except the models, and the rare Fae automaton is cool. But once you figure out the secret to their weakness, it loses all its luster really fast. I also had the pleasure of fighting a giant tree monster that was really fun. Until you did the mental math that axes hurt trees, and just like the automatons, the cool factor was lost. The puzzles are pretty simple and are a lot of color matching and running around in circles to flip switches. They were entertaining for the first handful, but not so great as the game went on. They are the same all the way through, and many games have that kind of experience. but it felt like there was so many in the first few realms that they weren't special, just sprinkled on the map to fill in gaps. The most fun I had was running an entire map of puzzles, dungeons, and combat, and after we finished it, the fun was gone. Most of them don't even drop any loot, which may be a bug or just a random chance mechanic that forces you to do all of them just to make sure that you get every piece of loot available. Overall, it was lackluster, and that's just the gameplay in the world. The real issues start next. The issues in this title are mostly pointed to one linchpin: weird design choices just for the sake of being weird, or for bringing other genres' niches into this one. Let's talk about the biggest issue that the internet jumped on fast: the requirement of always online play. I'll let that requirement slide here. Most survival games are always online if you play on a private server with friends instead of self-hosting. I'm fine with that one. But always online connected to company servers for this type of game doesn't sit quite right. Add on top of that terrible server issues and disconnects at any given portal, and you have a recipe for frustration. Constant disconnects that felt like a coin flip every time you entered a portal. You know, the portals that are supposed to be the crux of the game? Yeah, those ones. It was not a fun time fighting a load screen boss just to progress the game, and at least 50%, if not more of the time, losing to that boss. The major systems of the game feel convoluted and not at all fun. Crafting, building, upgrading, augmenting, all of these require a bench of some kind, and most of them require a whole workshop of benches and little knickknacks that really just feel like clutter and convolution for the sake of complexity. Never mind it takes 10 years to do anything in the game with crafting, or that your carry weight feels super low all of the time, even with the upgraded packs and stats. The combat system itself is very boring, and even then there's issues that don't make sense. The hard shot vulnerability system is neat and all, and you should feel good when you do it, if you can ever manage it. I know it's coming, haha, get good, you're bad, etc. But 80 shot attempts to hit a hard shot and not getting one on multiple different enemies and types is insane. Anatomically, I know where the heart is, or at least where it should be in most animals and humanoids, but unless it's literally in their ass, these enemies don't have hearts because the ass is the only place I didn't try. The materials and gathering in this game is another point of complexity for complexity's sake. Differentiation in identical materials that have no actual effect on stats or changes is wild to me. There's no difference between predator meat and prey meat, but they are different and take up valuable slots in your bags separately for some unknown reason. The tables that you need to craft take ages to actually build because of crafting times, and when you can craft them, you can't just upgrade the one you have, even if they do the exact same things. You have to break that one down to craft the new one. But many times, you need the old one to make materials for the new one, and if you break it down early, you're double out of luck, because you don't get all of the materials back for the original craft. It's crazy and maddening. And on top of all of that some materials can only be found in certain realms, and once again, it's a 50-50 shot if you'll even make it through the portal without crashing to the main menu. And it takes an eternity to connect to servers to make it back into your game, only to find out that you need to hit the portal again and probably crash again in a vicious cycle that just felt like a waste of time. I want to compare this experience to my experience in Helldivers 2. Another new game that launched recently that experienced a lot of server issues and bugs in general. The team for Helldivers worked night and day to get the game playable with multiple patches over the first weekend, let alone the first week. Nightingale, though, has not had a single patch in the 9 days it has been out to fix any issues according to their Steam page. They have done one server maintenance the day after launch, which was also 2 days early, and nothing since. It really makes you start to think who cares about the fun and players, and who just wants the quick cash and time to hopefully make a better game. It's early access and all, but the game is in the worst position I have seen an early access game in yet. And I have put a fair chunk of hours into Star Citizen over the years, and that is a nightmare in its own right. With all the issues here, there's still hope for Nightingale, though I don't think that they can change anything major in the next few months, let alone the 1 year that they claim to be in early access for. First things first, the server hosting needs to be fixed, or an offline play mode made available. The developers have already said that this is a key change that they want to make, but that fixes stability, not the overall middling to bad game underneath it. A lot of the issues here seem to be with complexity for complexity's sake, while also severely lacking in that complexity and diversity for puzzles, combat, enemies, dungeons, buildings, and biomes, if not much more. I put 13 hours into this game since it launched, and the entire time it felt like I was fighting the game just to play it. Let the players breathe. Let them find new things. Let them explore these worlds and find materials. It feels like everything is laid out to check boxes Instead of being the big open world for survival and exploration, fix the UI. Fix the fact that the key bindings don't work half the time, or that the escape key only works sometimes. I've already said it a lot here. There's a lot to fix, and there is some type of interesting gameplay and world underneath all of this complexity and convolution. I want to like this game. The story that we have seen and the world itself are different enough to make me want to play the game. It's everything else about this game that makes it difficult. At this time, I'm done with Nightingale. I have a feeling that if all goes well, I'll be back and maybe then the whole playthrough won't get derailed.